topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Churchill said, "Those who fail to learn from history are condemned to repeat it." Kevin Hallinan believes that certainly applies to business. Welcome to Winning Business Radio, here at W4CY Radio. That's W4CY.com. And now, your host, Kevin Hallinan.
Thanks, everybody, for joining in today. I am Kevin Hallinan, and welcome back to Winning Business TV and Radio on W4CY.com. We're streaming live on Talk4TV.com, and we're streaming live on Facebook and at Winning Business at Winning Business Radio. And of course, we're available in podcast after the live show. Wow, I can't talk today. Wherever you get your podcast content, that's YouTube, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Apple. The mission of Winning Business Radio and TV, as regular viewers and listeners know, is really to offer insights and advice to help people avoid the mistakes of others, to learn best practices. Those are the how-tos, the what-tos, the what-not-tos, to be challenged and hopefully to be inspired by the successes of others. Who are those others? Consultants, coaches, advisors, authors, founders and owners, entrepreneurs, people with expertise. But virtually every successful person I've ever talked to has had some form of failure in their lives and careers. So as I say every time, while we all have to get our knees skinned once in a while, I'm driven to keep those scrapes from needing major surgery. Let's endeavor to learn from history so we don't repeat it. I've spent the better part of my career equipping businesses to grow from solopreneurs to small and medium-sized companies all the way up to the Fortune 50. I've seen some of those companies win, and to varying degrees, I've seen some fail. And I've had the opportunity to rub elbows with some of the highest performing people around and with some who probably should have found other professions. And in my own businesses, I've had lots of success, but some failures too. I like to think I've learned a lot from those experiences. So yeah, you'll hear from me, but mostly you're going to hear from our guests, those experts, consultants, coaches, advisors, etc. And today is no exception. My guest today is John Gates, paid negotiation expert, keynote speaker, and best-selling author of Act Your Wage. Here's his bio. John Gates is an international best-selling author and salary negotiation expert who has overseen more than 75,000, not a typo, job offers during his 30-year career in corporate recruiting. As a former head of global recruiting for multiple Fortune 500 companies, he trained hiring teams on how to negotiate, giving him rare insider insight into what actually works. Now the creator of the Salary Coach Method, John helps executives and job seekers confidently navigate offer conversations without risking the deal. His sessions blend sharp strategy with a calming, practical tone that audiences love and apply immediately. John's a mission-driven speaker who leaves professionals saying, "Why didn't anyone teach me this sooner?" He's the international best-selling author of Act Your Wage, What to Say and How to Say It to Get the Best Possible Salary Package. He holds a bachelor's in management and finance, a double major from the University of Oregon. He resides in Medford, Oregon, and has 5 kids, 2 boys and 3 girls, with an interesting story, but we'll get to that in a moment. John, welcome to Winning Business Radio.
Thanks so much, Kevin, for having me. I was so excited to hear about your show, and now that I'm here, I am absolutely thrilled. It's going to be a fun ride today.
I agree. And before we're done, John, we're going to promo a second appearance, which is a little unusual, but we're going to do it. So tell us about your kids.
So I have 5 children. 2 of them, 2 of them are biological. They're both boys, and the 3 girls are all adopted, and adopted them when they were older children. Like most people who expand through adoption, adopt when they are, children are very young. They do that for specific personal reasons. But, I wanted to impact the lives of people that were already somewhat formed and so on. And so I adopted 2 girls from Colombia, South America when they were 10 and 7.
Wow.
And now they're about 30 and 27. So they've come a long way, and adopted another girl from Alabama, met her through the foster care system when she was 16, actually adopted her when she was in her mid to late 20s, and now she is 37.
Wow.
So most people have no idea why you would adopt a child, or anyone for that matter, who's older than age 18. But over the years, I built a very personal relationship with this person. She had been involved in the family. I'd become a primary advisor for her in a lot of ways of her life. And I know that people who grow up without a family identity are at risk in a lot of ways. Like, I think you need to know who, where you belong to, who you are. That's really foundational in the life of any person. So,
and I know in today's world, it's controversial to even say a father figure, but I believe people, I think you do too, need both a mother and a dad.
Yeah, absolutely true. And people who don't have that have a really hard time making good choices. Children who age out of foster care are significantly higher for criminal backgrounds, for single motherhood, single fatherhood. Basically, they make less desirable decisions throughout their life. Data bears this out. If you look at the prison population of the United States, a very large portion of those folks are people who aged out of the foster system without any sort of meaningful family connection. And if you think about it this way, this is kind of how it works. Like, I don't know about you, Kevin, but when I was growing up, a lot of the reasons why I didn't do certain things is because grandma would have been ashamed if I had been caught doing that. Or I would have disappointed my mother, or something like that. It kind of acts as a curb on your behavior. It enhances your conscience in those situations. But if you're growing up in a group home, which is where most foster teens live, who are your influencers? Well, they're usually going to be state employees or other foster kids that you're in that group home with, who are equally like untethered. And I think that's why bad choices, life-altering decisions, the face tattoo or something like that happens to you when you're in that situation.
It's funny you were saying that, and I remember my grandmother. My mom's maiden name was Ricciuti, Italian, and my grandmother would always say, make sure they know you're a Ricciuti. I mean, she was really about reputation and good choices, but you just reminded me of that. So now you grew up in Oregon as well?
Yeah, I did. Was born here, raised here, lived in Portland and Eugene, graduated from the University of Oregon in Eugene. And then sometime around 1998, I left Oregon to chase the Fortune 500 career. I ended up moving to Richmond, Virginia, which is about as far away from Oregon as you can get and still be in the continental U.S. And after that, I went to Birmingham, Alabama, then to Fort Wayne, Indiana, then to St. Louis, Missouri, then to Houston, Texas, and now back in Oregon. So I've lived in a lot of places.
Yeah, we're going to talk about some of those positions. What were your early interests, though, before college?
Before college, great question. So when I was in middle school, I wanted to be an astronaut. And that was no like casual interest either. I actually reverse engineered the path I would need to take in 7th grade. I did this on my own to figure out, well, all right. I thought about how do most people get to become astronauts? And typically they are Navy pilots, something like that. And so how do you become a naval aviator, Top Gun guy, something like that? Well, you need to have an appointment to the Naval Academy. How do you get that? You need a sponsor like a senator or somebody like that, usually to get you into the Naval Academy. That's very helpful. So I was thinking about this stuff at the age of I don't know, 12 years old. I was
That's really cool.
imagining what I was going to do. I was really inspired. It was a huge goal of mine to become an astronaut. A little later on in life, though, I switched over to wanting to be a scientist. And then I figured, well, all the scientists of the world, they work for business people.
Yeah.
And so then I decided to shift over into a business focus, and always had a strong interest in owning my own company one day. So I majored in management and finance, thinking that that would help me toward owning my own company one day. And here I am.
What was behind your decision to go to U Oregon?
I lived there at the time. Actually, thought about getting into a university in California called Harvey Mudd University, which a lot of people don't know about Harvey Mudd, but it's like an MIT on the West Coast. Very niche-y. The best science nerds of the universe go to Harvey Mudd. I actually didn't get in. It was a shock. I was one of these people who was used to achieving everything. I took 5 advanced placement courses as a senior in high school, science, languages, and music. So I was very, very well-rounded and active in the community, and I still didn't get in. Very, very selective. So it was after that I sort of did some rediscovery and decided just to attend the University of Oregon because it was local. I was going to fund all of my own university costs. My family weren't in any position to help me at the time.
Yeah.
So I ended up figuring out the most efficient path to completing university with the smallest investment possible. And back in those days, they would charge you full-time tuition for 12 or more credits in a term. And I took advantage of that, taking 18 to 21 credits a term.
Oh, man.
To reduce the cost per class, basically. And that was the way I was thinking about things. I guess I've always been a little bit of a logical pathfinder in those ways.
Yeah, I remember my student loan payment was $55 a month. I mean, and I thought that was a lot,
I worked my way through college. Like besides that sort of heavy course load, I worked 30 hours a week at Domino's Pizza.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Slinging pizza and trying not to speed, because back then there was a 30-minute guarantee. They had to do away with that eventually, but that made working at Domino's exciting and fun. It's a place I
to challenge every delivery, right?
Yeah.
So how did you, kind of a big answer here. This may be the last question before our first commercial break, but how did you get to recruiting and talent management at such a high level?
Well, the first part of that is how did I get into it at all? Like I wanted to be a financial analyst and got an offer while I was in college to join a big tech company in Portland, Oregon, to be a financial analyst. And 3 weeks before I got that, I was supposed to start, they sent me a letter saying, "We're so sorry, but we're rescinding all offers for anyone who hasn't started yet." So
I had that happen to me once too.
Yeah, too bad, so sad. You're laid off before you even start. And so I was in a position where I was newly married, had a son on the way. He wasn't born yet, my first son, and terrified. So I ended up just networking like crazy. It took me 3 months in a poor economy in the Pacific Northwest to find my job after college. And I ended up recruiting for a temporary agency in Portland. And they hired me because I had a degree and I could speak Spanish and I looked good in a suit. And that was the criteria. They wanted me to go open a new office in Hillsboro, and it was heavily Hispanic at the time. And they wanted someone who could recruit that population, translate all the testing and application materials, and then dispatch people on temporary assignment. And that's how I got my job, first job in recruiting. And I've been there ever since. 5 years later, I decided to join corporate recruiting, leave the temporary agency industry behind, and very quickly rose into leadership. So I think by the time 2002 came around, I was leading a recruiting function, building one from scratch, and then went into leadership in the Fortune 500.
Wow. All right, hold that thought. Everybody, we're going to come right back with John Gates in about a minute after this break.
You're listening to Winning Business Radio with Kevin Hallinan on W4CY Radio. That's W4CY.com. Don't go away. More helpful information is coming right up, right here on Winning Business Radio.
Have you ever dreamt of being on the radio? Well, now is your chance. Be a radio show guest on the #1 ranked internet radio station and promote you and your business for free. Yes, you heard it, free. Business advertising right here on W4CY.com. Call 561-506-4031 now to get booked on one of our shows. That's 561-506-4031. Get your free advertising now.
And now back to Winning Business Radio with Kevin Hallinan, presenting exciting topics and expert guests with one goal in mind, to help you succeed in business. Here once again is Kevin Hallinan.
Welcome back. We are with John Gates, pay negotiation expert, international best-selling author and keynote speaker. You're judging from, I use LinkedIn as a source document, of course. You joined ITT, which is a company that I haven't heard a lot about, even though they're giant. I was in the private career school business, and I, of course, remember ITT Tech and knew some people that worked there. As a divisional recruiting leader, tell us about that role, and we'll get into some of the others as well.
Oh, that was interesting, actually.
Key takeaways, yeah.
Yeah. I started that job actually as a response to the 2007, 2008 financial crisis that we all know about. Before that, I actually took a chance and started my own recruiting business. The first time, hung out my own shingle and decided to specialize in the mining sector because that was what I was just coming out of. Talent acquisition in the mining sector. Was going to do a lot of headhunting in that. And then I sensed the economic headwinds of starting in 2007. I didn't know if I had the right financial depth to weather a significant storm. And I didn't know if this was going to be a blip or a tsunami. So I decided to shutter the business and I took this job in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And this ITT at the time was a conglomerate company. They controlled, it was a lot of technology and so on. At one time in the past, I think the ITT Technical Institute was part of their holdings. Yeah. But they divested that. And still now people, when they hear the name, they think of the technical school. But this, in Fort Wayne, Indiana, they were making battlefield radios for the U.S. Army. So all the radio units that slide into a Humvee or fit into a tank or something like that, they were also doing satellite navigation equipment, things that would give surveillance advantage to troops on the ground. But it was a defense company. And for the last 25 or 30 years, they'd been operating that facility, producing this kind of technical equipment for the military. And so I thought, hey, this will be a nice, safe place to go and be. And if I like it, I can stay there. 2.5, 3 years later, I got laid off because the defense industry just got hammered with massive budget cuts in the federal government. And this was the most advanced sort of talent acquisition job that was available in the small community of Fort Wayne, Indiana at the time. So I was pretty sure I was going to have to relocate if I was going to continue my career in TA. And that's what then moved me to St. Louis, Missouri.
And that was Peabody Energy.
Yep, worked for Peabody Energy for 4 years. Global mining powerhouse. What a fun company to work for. Some of the best people I've ever met in my professional life worked at Peabody Energy. And they had mining operations all over the planet, and I was the head of recruiting there. So was responsible directly for all recruiting in the US and dotted line responsibility for Australia and China and any other markets that they wanted to expand into. They were toying with the idea of launching a mine in Mongolia, in southern Mongolia. And I had the responsibility to figure out the staffing plan for that mine. And that was really, really fun. How are you going to staff it? You need hundreds and hundreds of people where no people live. I saw pictures of the Gobi Desert in Mongolia, and it looked like Mars, Kevin. It was like red sand, no trees, just rocks and sand and everything for hundreds of miles around. After I got far down the path of figuring out how we were going to staff that, the company ended up curtailing that investment because they couldn't come to terms with the Chinese government. And you would imagine that what does China have to say about what happens in southern Mongolia? Well, it has to do with like flight evacuations. If somebody gets hurt at the mine site, you want to be able to evacuate the wounded person. And Peabody has always had a gold-plated philosophy around safety. That was something that I truly loved about representing them as a recruiter. They were always much more concerned about safety than a lot of other mining companies. And they couldn't get clear, like flying that close to the border of China. If you have an uncleared flight plan or something like that, you're just going to get shot down.
Yeah. Wow.
So we couldn't resolve that issue, and so decided to scuttle the whole idea of doing this based on that. Until that could be fixed, there was just no way they would commit to building something there that was going to last for 140 years.
So that would have been almost like generating or creating a city, a town.
Yeah. It's like picture the old-fashioned company town where you would have to build a town with all the infrastructure of a town, a fire department, a police department, housing for people, place for them to get food and entertainment, schools, and everything else. Yes, schools for kids. And then training infrastructure, like how are you going to teach the rural Mongolian population who doesn't know how to drive a car to drive a 400-ton rock truck safely? And you've probably seen these giant mining rigs where the tires are twice the size of a man. You could run over an F-150 and not even know you've done it in one of those. So there was a lot, and we were imagining that this would be a multi-generational situation where you would recruit Mongolian nationals to staff most of the mine. You would bring in initially international expats to lead and train and do all that, with a period of time where you're going to hand over and train up to Mongolian nationals over the course of several years. Eventually just handing the whole thing off to mostly local people. And then you would probably employ their children and then maybe even their grandchildren. So
reminds me of visiting the Hoover Dam, and they built Boulder City.
That sort of idea doesn't exist often in today's economy. But in the mining business, I learned that it's geologic time, really. It takes years to go from greenfield project to actual revenue production. So you have to be looking at the price of commodities and be pretty sure that 3, 4, 5 years from now, when you're starting to get the money recouped from your investments, that the commodity price is going to justify actually operating the thing. So every mining project has break-even point, just like anything else. I learned this in the oil business as well. You might have a price per ton of, I don't know, for coal, maybe it's $20 a ton or something. It's like that. Well, if it costs you $22 a ton to get it out of the ground, you're just gonna shutter the thing until the economy or the price of that commodity shifts to where it's favorable. And there was an old saying in that industry that you got to make hay while the sun is shining. So if the commodity prices go way up and you have an operating asset, you're going to try to double staff, triple staff, do what you can to expand production during that window, because there will come a time, sure as anything, a few years down the road where the commodity price goes below what it costs you to get it out. And then you're laying people off, you're slowing things down, you're waiting for the market to return.
So after that, you made it to Marathon Oil,
Yep.
head of talent acquisition.
Yep. I moved out of St. Louis down to Houston, Texas to take on the head of talent acquisition for Marathon Oil. And that was a terrific job. I reported to a challenging personality there. That was fun. And for those listening, you probably have also had times when you had great bosses and difficult bosses to work for. And so 3 months after joining Marathon Oil, the price of oil dropped from $95 a barrel to $65 a barrel.
Huge.
Yep. And their break-even point was somewhere in the 40s. And then over the next few months after that, it went from 65 down to a low of $26 a barrel. So that was a shock. They were underwater. And this has been the case throughout my career. When you are the head of talent acquisition or you work in corporate recruiting, as soon as the company you work for decides it's time to get smaller, the people who make the company bigger are pretty easy targets for layoff packages, stuff like that. So I helped Marathon Oil go through 4 rounds of layoffs, having the conversations, escorting people out of the building, doing all that. Until
not the fun part.
Yeah, it was finally down to me and an ace recruiter that I had selected and hired. We were the only survivors of the talent acquisition team at that point, and more cutting had to be made. So they decided to cut the expensive head of the function and take the ace recruiter and fold her under another HR leader. That was something they felt they could do at the time. So I took a layoff package and hung out my shingle again. So
Recruiting Transformations. Tell us about that company.
Yeah. So Recruiting Transformations is a company where I help manufacturing businesses mainly to fix their broken recruiting process. So if it takes too long to hire people, or they're spending too much money on search agencies, or their internal recruiting function has a bad reputation, or they seem unresponsive, or something needs to be done and they don't know how to fix that problem, then I can go in and help them fix it. And sometimes I act as an interim leader if they've just fired their head of recruiting, or somebody is on a maternity leave or something like that. I love those interim leadership gigs. Those are a lot of fun. But I did that for several years before starting Salary Coach.
Can you give us a couple of highlights?
Yeah. So I guess the best highlight of that time with Recruiting Transformations is a company called DLL, which is a financial services company based in the Netherlands. Their head of recruiting was going to go on maternity leave. And so they reached out to me to ask me if I would cover during that time. But also, the head of HR wanted to know if there was anything that could be done to improve the function. So while I was going to be there for 3 months holding down the fort, She wanted me to do my typical analysis and diagnosis of what could be improved and build a roadmap for that. So when the current TA leader came back, she would have a list of action items and things to pursue. Well, she came back for about a week and then decided that she didn't want to come back after all. And then they extended me. I ended up doing that for a year. It was completely remote. And so it was all during the pandemic and travel restrictions. Nobody was traveling anywhere. So I was in Zoom calls all day long, working on stuff, fixing stuff, rolling out new process. That was an absolute blast. And I left there on extremely good terms. I miss the team very much. In fact, behind me somewhere here, I've got a picture of me with the team. We finally were allowed to gather face to face to finally build a global recruiting process. So that company they were operating in like 27 to 30 countries worldwide, and each country had its own recruiting process. And so that was a big thing we were trying to achieve together, was to create a uniform global recruiting process that everyone could agree to. We needed to get there so that we could share recruiting resources. So say the Germany recruiter was slow, it would be very difficult for them to help out the recruiter in Southern Europe because the processes were completely different. Now with a uniform process, we could share resources across boundaries much easier that way. So that's one. I also was interim head of HR for a company called Analogic. And Analogic is in Boston. They make the stuff that scans your bags at the airport for explosives and things that shouldn't be there. Very interesting. I love technology companies. I relate really well to engineers, and just love the talent issues with engineering heavy companies. So that was an interesting situation. Lasted about 7 months, and it was really sort of like, I don't know, it was nebulous. It was one of these things that wasn't scoped really well. They wanted the improvement roadmap. I was acting like an interim head, but didn't have that formal title. So it was just a little bit squishy here and there, a lot of political nuance within that company. But I really enjoyed the time there. Ultimately helped them to select and hire a new permanent head of HR. And she's been phenomenal in terms of taking what I started and finishing it with her own set of priorities and so on. So I like doing that kind of work.
All right, we're going to take another break right here for about a minute. Everybody, we'll be back in just a minute with John Gates.
You're listening to Winning Business Radio with Kevin Hallinan on W4CY Radio. That's W4CY.com. Don't go away. More helpful information is coming right up, right here on Winning Business Radio.
The YP.com website is your local search engine. If you're looking for a good restaurant, it can help you find the right one nearby with ratings and reviews. Or if your car breaks down, you can use the YP app to find the closest repair shop. Or maybe you're just looking for something to do on a Friday night. Well, it has great local coupons for all sorts of things in your area. No matter what, when, or where, if you're looking for something, YP Local Search can help you find it. So go to YP.com or download the app to search local, find local, and save local.
And now back to Winning Business Radio with Kevin Hallinan, presenting exciting topics and expert guests with one goal in mind, to help you succeed in business. Here once again is Kevin Hallinan.
We are back again with John Gates. So tell us, take us from Asante, I think, in healthcare, and then to Salary Coach in 21.
Yep. Okay. So, excuse me. So, after a while of consulting, I decided that it was time to come back to Oregon, and I had an opportunity to join a company which is a significant healthcare provider in Southern Oregon. And they were going to pay for my relocation and everything back to Oregon.
Right.
So I thought, well, okay, maybe it's time for me to dive back into the corporate world. I was really aligning with the mission of Asante. It's a regional healthcare company, so they have 3 hospitals and over 50 medical clinics throughout Southern Oregon. And I never lived in Southern Oregon. It sounded like a really cool opportunity, and I loved the people of this place. So it was a great chance for me to come and do that. And just like a lot of opportunities, though, you start working and you have this dream boss that you're working for. And people listening might be able to relate to this. You join a company because there's such amazing alignment between what you want to do and what your boss wants you to do. And so there was a CEO shift couple years into my tenure with Asante. The old CEO retired. They brought in a new CEO, and the new CEO fired my boss. So he fired a couple of people, actually. And the new boss, the new head of HR, had conflicts with me in what I wanted to do. So I perform best with a boss who says, I don't know a lot about recruiting, John. I'm hiring you because you know a lot about it. So please go solve these problems. Just tell me how you're going to go about it, and then I'll provide you some political coverage and the budget that you need and everything else. So the new head of HR was an absolute micromanager. And I die under that kind of leadership. I can't handle it. The days grew from 10-hour days to 14-plus-hour days, trying to please the micromanaging nature of my new boss.
Wow.
And that was tough. So I thought, well, it's time for me to leave and to go back to being independent, because that's what I truly love doing. So I got back into recruiting transformations, and then sometime during following the Great Resignation, I don't know if you remember that, but there was a period of time where during the pandemic where everyone was quitting their jobs and companies were hiring lots of people, and it was a very favorable recruiting environment. Sometime during that, then the Fed started to raise interest rates. And I knew from all the previous shifts in my career that and rapid increases of the interest rate is going to cool the hiring economy quite a bit. I knew that was coming. And so I started thinking, well, if recruiting nationwide or even internationally hits the skids, what is it that I'm going to do? And I started thinking about all the things that I was good at, what could I offer? And that's how I came up with Salary Coach, because for years and years, I had helped friends and family to negotiate their pay. I knew a lot about how to do that safely because I was the guy on the other side of the negotiating table for my whole career. I knew what mistakes looked like. I knew what annoyance, I knew what would annoy me, what would annoy hiring managers, what would introduce risks. I knew what would be the safe path forward. And so I just took some time and I developed a Salary Coach method. I wrote Act Your Wage. I launched Salary Coach. But before I did any of that, I did a pilot program a few years ago, maybe 4 years ago now. I went out to LinkedIn and I found some job seekers and I said, I'm thinking about launching this as a product line, but I want to test if I can work effectively with people that I don't know, that aren't members of my inner circle. So I'll do this for you for free. I'll be your advisor. I'll tell you how to navigate the upcoming offer process or the money conversations at every step. I'll walk you through that as a silent advisor. and let's measure the results together. And if you want to do this, I'll do it for free. I just wanted to test it. And every single one of them, I did that with 10 people. Every single one of them had a gain. The lowest gain was 9,000 and the highest was in the low 50s. I think it was 52 to 54,000 gain in the package. And then as soon as I finished that, I knew I had a business that could be win-win, that would be helpful to the people that need that help. And I really started realizing just how many people leave money on the table. I tracked this when I was the head of recruiting. I started doing that when I worked for Capital One Financial around Y2K, because I'd already been laid off a couple of times. I wanted the self-defense of data. And so I started tracking it. I set a goal, Kevin, to cover my annual salary every month in negotiation savings. So I knew how much money people were leaving on the table, and I achieved that goal 10 months out of 12 typically. It was something that I felt would insulate me from future layoffs. So I started tracking it, and it is shocking how much money people leave on the table and they don't know they're doing it. The typical experienced professional is probably leaving 5 figures on the table. Somebody who's senior, it could well be 6 figures. I just closed a deal out today with a 6-figure gain, nearly $200,000 in the package.
Wow.
So
you talk about mindsets. Sorry to interrupt. Mindsets being critical, and fear is one of those mindsets, right? Can you flesh that out a little bit?
Yeah. So fear is, when I was writing Act Your Wage, I interviewed 100 people, men and women, and I asked them, do you negotiate? Do you not negotiate? Do you kind of pick at it, poke at it? I ended up concluding that my statistics were still right. 80% of people don't negotiate at all, or it's just a very, very light approach to negotiating. I'd say of the remaining 20%, 10% screw it up phenomenally bad, and the other 10% do it effectively. And what happens though is you apply to a job you want, right? You go through the application process, and then the phone rings. It's a job you want. And somebody like me will say, hey, Kevin, what's your salary expectation? And it's a screening question. You don't have much leverage right now because nobody knows about you except for the screener. You really want to interview with a hiring manager, and there's this gatekeeper you have to get by. So you're afraid that if you answer this question wrong, you're going to lose the chance to interview and move forward. And that fear pushes you into a corner. Really, you tend to lowball yourself right at this point. Or you do the opposite and you give a number that's way too large, thinking you have leverage that you don't. And then you get screened out. And both of those things happen. You know that there's high stakes. When you're interviewing for a job, especially if you're unemployed, the fear is there because the stakes are there, right? You've already figured out when you become homeless because you don't have a salary or an income. You might have a severance package or something like that. And so the pressure is on to get something and get it fast. And because of that pressure, you'll settle for less. You just want to get rid of this uncertainty in your life. And this happens at the offer stage too. That's why people don't negotiate. They get the offer, that they see the promised land of stable employment and an income returned and benefits, health insurance. All these things are things they cannot afford to risk letting go.
Stock options.
And they're worried that if they push it, they will lose the chance to move forward. Or they'll have their offer yanked away, and then they'll have to explain to their entourage of people that depend upon them that they screwed it up at the finish line, and they don't want that to happen. So they play it excessively safe. And so like my whole practice is built around how to minimize the risk of these conversations while maximizing the offer. And there are ways to do that. Most people just don't know how. And that's what I offer.
Can you give a summary? I mean, without revealing too much, because I'm sure it's a proprietary process that people pay for, but can you give us a generalization of it's a 5-step process, right?
Yeah, there's a salary coach method. And so the first thing you have to do is satisfy the screener who's going to ask you that first pay question with an answer that's going to help you get the interview without destroying your ability to negotiate later. You can't paint yourself into a corner right there. Just to, you can't sell your future offer cheap just to get the interview. And this happens all the time. So there's that. And then once you get the interview, you have to climb up the value ladder in the interview. So you have to learn to answer interview questions in a way that frames you as a high value person, because what comes next is the offer approval process. This is very political sometimes. So let's say you were the hiring manager, Kevin, and you decide that you're going to hire me. There are people above you that have to sign off on the offer, typically. And you have to go to them and justify why you want that much money or that title or all that stuff. And so the best strategy is to get the highest value in the mind of Kevin, the hiring manager, so that he can go to bat for you and justify a high offer initially. Then in the offer and the counter offer process, we're only tweaking instead of having to rebuild. If that initial offer comes in 30% low, it is intensely difficult to go back and adjust that. They've already decided that you're in that sort of
too big a gap,
lower tier. They've already made that case with approvers. It's going to be really difficult to go back. This is where the insider information that I have comes into play and really helps people to get it right the first time. And so then you're going to get an offer, and here's a key that I'll give away for free. Don't accept the offer immediately, even if you love it. That is a massive mistake that most people make. There's almost always extra money on the table somewhere. So what I do, which is proprietary, is I help people with a process to discover what's still on the table without putting the offer at risk, and then creating a counter offer proposal that also does not create a lot of risk for you.
And most people, focus. Sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say, most people think negotiation like this is a high stakes game of chicken, where you put out an ultimatum. Here's what I want, take it or leave it. That's a very high risk strategy that we don't do at Salary Coach.
So I know you focus, on the total compensation, not just salary, correct?
That's correct.
So there could be stock options or additional stock options, sign-on bonuses. You mentioned that in the book.
Oh yeah, there's probably a dozen or more different ways that you can get value into the package. So one of the things that happened in today's deal is and I can notice things that the average person doesn't notice. When you get an offer letter, for example, I can look at it and say, there's something big that's missing here that might be included in an offer at your level. A lot of companies will include it. So let's go after that and see if it's there. This example was severance. So
interesting. Yeah.
The hiring company was a private equity firm. And in case you don't know this, private equity firms, they buy and sell companies just like house flippers buy and sell houses. They will buy a company that they think is undervalued. They'll fix the things that are wrong with that company, and then they'll go back to the market in a 3 to 5 year window usually and sell that business. They might buy it for $200 million with the goal that in 3 years they're going to sell that for $600 million. And that's how they make their money. So that was this situation. private equity company owned this business, and this was a C-suite, C-level position within that private that firm that they owned, that asset that they owned. We knew through the interview process that their selling the business timeline was 2 years. They're going to sell this in 2 years. Well, what happens to the C-suite in a company that gets sold to another business? Sometimes they keep their jobs. Sometimes they do not. And so you want to have an equity stake so that when that business is sold, there's a significant financial windfall for you. Yeah. But also you have, depending on your age and stage, like if you were 58 or 60 years old or something like that, and the sale is happening when you're 62, how hard is it going to be to get the next gig? How much longer is it going to take? Realistically,
I've seen that happen so many times.
Ageism is a real problem. Real problem. Once you round the corner of 50, you will start to realize that it's not as easy to land as it used to be. And the harder, the more weird the employment market, the longer it's going to take you to land.
John, we have to wrap this up. I just noticed the time. How do people reach out? What's the best way for them to contact you if they want more information? Or might want to
Thank you, Kevin. The very best way is probably to hit me at john@salary.coach.
Perfect.
It's not .com, it's .coach. That's the best way, john@salary.coach. And you can ask me any question and we can see if it might be right to work together.
Perfect. Now, this is something I mentioned at the beginning that I don't do very often. I've already invited John back next month. It's going to be March 23rd. He's going to share on a different topic. And the promo is this: what if starting a consulting business isn't reckless, but a faithful, well-aligned next step? John will introduce The Crossroads, which is a proven faith-aligned path that helps Christian corporate leaders launch their first consulting business in just 6 weeks without burning bridges, underpricing themselves, or wandering in uncertainty. And I'm really looking forward to that. And we will have another good conversation at that time. John, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Kevin. I'm looking forward to it too. It's going to be a blast just like this was.
All right, one more time, john@salary.coach.
Correct. Thank you, Kevin.
Perfect. And thanks everybody for watching and listening. This is a show about business and business challenges. If you've got concerns about the sales effectiveness of your company, whether your sales team is you or small or large, feel free to reach out to me on Facebook or LinkedIn at Winning Business Radio, or drop me a note, one of my many email addresses, kevin@winningbusinessradio.com. Thank you to producer and engineer Juan for another job well done. Be sure to join us again next week. That's Monday, February 9th. We're going to do it all over again. Until then, this is Kevin Hallinan.
You've been listening to Winning Business Radio with your host, Kevin Hallinan. If you missed any part of this episode, the podcast is available on Talk4 Podcasting and iHeartRadio. For more information and questions, go to winningbusinessradio.com or check us out on social media. Tune in again next week and every Monday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time to listen live to Winning Business Radio on W4CY Radio, W4CY.com. Until then, let's succeed where others have failed and win in business with Kevin Hallinan and Winning Business Radio.